Welcome back to the deep dive. So, today I want to start with something that I think is, well, it's kind of a shared trauma.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
I think almost everyone listening has seen this happen, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or, I don't know, just a taxpayer walking through a school. It's the smartboard phenomenon.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yo, right.
The expensive screen that just ends up being a wall decoration.
You know this scene perfectly. A school district spends a generic, millions of dollars on these brand new, glowing, interactive whiteboards.
hmm
They get installed everywhere. There's probably a ribbon cutting ceremony. And then 6 months later, you walk in and the teacher is using it as a very expensive projection
For
screen.
the same transparencies they were using in 1995.
Yeah, exactly.
It is the classic definition of tech for tech's sake. And it's painful, really, because it's such a waste of potential. You have a supercomputer on the wall and you're using it like a piece of dry erase paper.
Right. And that specific frustration is what we're tackling today. We are looking at a document called the Educator's Playbook, 10 Best Practices for K-12 Tech Integration.
Right.
And I have to be honest, when I first saw that title, I thought, great, a
hmm
manual on how to plug in iPads. I was ready to snooze.
But you were surprised.
I really was. It's not a technical manual at all. It's surprisingly philosophical. It reads less like instructions on wires and Wi-Fi and more like a manifesto on how human beings actually learn.
And that's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack these 10 strategies to
Yeah.
see how we move education from just digitizing old habits like that glowing PDF you mentioned
Right.
to doing things that were literally impossible before the technology existed.
And I have to say, there's one example coming up, the time travel review, that completely sold me on this. If I could have done that in 11th grade history, I might actually remember 11th grade history.
It's a complete game changer. But to get there, we have to lay the foundation. The playbook starts with a rule that seems obvious, but it's the one everyone breaks. Principle 1. Lead with the learning target.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is backward design, right? But let me play devil's advocate. If I buy a 3D printer for a classroom, shouldn't I just let the kids, play with it? Why do I need a target?
Because that's how you end up with 30 plastic keychains and no actual learning. Think about how schools usually buy tech. A grant comes in or a board member gets excited and they buy, say, 30 VR headsets.
Okay.
They drop them in a classroom and say to the teacher, okay, figure out how to use these,
So the tool comes first, and then you have to scramble to find a reason for it to exist.
which is completely backward. The playbook says, stop. Technology is never the what. It is only the how. You have to identify the standard, the actual knowledge you want the student to have before you even touch a device.
The playbook has a litmus test for this. It's a fill-in-the-blank sentence. I tried this on a few things I do, and it's actually really hard.
It's deceptively simple. The sentence is, I want students to master standard X, so I'm using tool Y because it allows them to. And here's the kicker.
What's the catch?
If you can't finish that sentence with a clear advantage over just using a pencil and paper, you don't use the tool.
That's the part I love. It's ruthless. If the iPad is just a digital piece of paper, put it away.
Precisely. It cuts through all the hype. We call it the right tool at the right time. And sometimes the right tool is a sticky note. But when the right tool is technology, it's usually because of principle 2, designing for universal access.
Okay, help me with the terminology. This is UDL, Universal Design for Learning. I've heard this thrown around, but is this just a rebrand of special ed? Is it just for students with disabilities?
That's the most common misconception. Think of UDL like the curb cut effect on a sidewalk.
Okay.
Originally, those little ramps were designed specifically for people in wheelchairs.
Right.
That's an accommodation. But then, people with strollers, people with delivery carts, people on skateboards, everyone started using them.
Because it was just a better design for everyone.
Exactly. So UDL is building that ramp into the lesson from the start, rather than trying to hammer it in later. It's moving from retrofitting, where you plan a lesson and then frantically try to adapt it, to barrier removal from day one.
And the playbook points to Microsoft Immersive Reader as a prime example here. For anyone who hasn't seen it, what does this actually do?
It's incredible, really. It takes any text on a screen and gives the user total control. It can read the text aloud. That's text-to-speech. It can break words into syllables for a student with dyslexia. It can change the background to high contrast. It can even instantly translate it.
And the key is that the student does this on their own, right? Discreetly. They don't have to raise their hand and ask for the easy version in front of their friends.
That is the universal part. It's available to everyone. and it ensures every student is grappling with the same rigorous content. We aren't dumbing down the biology lesson. We're just removing the barrier of decoding the text so they can get to the actual concept.
So we've got our foundation. Clear goal. Barriers are gone. Now we move into what the playbook calls the transformation. And this is where we hit another acronym, SAM,
Oh,
SAMR.
the SAM model. It's basically a ladder that describes how much impact the tech is really having.
Okay, walk us up the ladder because I feel like most classrooms get stuck on the bottom rung.
They do. At the bottom, you have substitution. This is your PDF worksheet. The tech is just a direct substitute for paper with no real functional change. It's, boring, but sometimes it's efficient.
Next rung up.
Augmentation. So the tech adds a little something. Maybe that PDF now has a spell checker, or you can paste a picture into it. It's better, but it's not revolutionary.
Then we get to modification.
Now we're actually changing the task. Instead of writing an essay alone, maybe the class is collaborating on a shared document in real time, commenting on each other's work. The task itself is different.
But the top of the ladder, that's the holy grail. Redefinition.
Redefinition is creating a learning task that was, as the playbook puts it, inconceivable without technology. If you took the tech away, the project just couldn't exist.
Which brings us to the time travel example. Break this down because this is the perfect example of redefinition.
Okay, so imagine a traditional assignment. Write a report on a historical figure. Most kids go to Wikipedia, copy-paste some dates, write 3 pages, and forget it immediately. It's passive.
And then comes the green screen.
Yes. In the time travel scenario, students have to script an interview, but they play both parts. They're the modern interviewer, and they're the historical figure. They film themselves against a green screen, and then, using a tool like Adobe Express, they superimpose themselves into actual historical footage.
So the final video shows the student talking to themselves, but they're dressed as Napoleon, and they're standing at Waterloo.
Exactly. Now think about the cognitive load there. You can't just copy-paste to script that interview. You have to understand the character's voice, their motivation, the context. And then you have to learn the technical skills, the lighting, the editing, the timing.
That is heavy lifting. That's not just learning history, that's synthesis. You're embodying the content.
And you couldn't do it with a pen and paper. That is redefinition. And it leads right into principle 4, ignite student creativity.
The shift from consumer to creator, but isn't creativity just a nice to have? Do we really have time for arts and crafts when there are standardized tests looming?
That's the argument you always hear.
Yeah.
But the data shows retention just skyrockets when we build something. We spend so much time training kids to be consumers. Listen to the lecture, read the chapter, watch the video.
So the playbook says ditch the multiple choice quiz.
Yes. Instead of clicking A, B, or C to prove, a science concept, you have to create a public service announcement, or you have to explain the concept to a younger audience.
Explain it to a 5-year-old method.
Einstein said if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. If I ask a student to use Canva to make a poster explaining photosynthesis to a 3rd grader, they have to understand it at a really deep level to simplify it. It stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a design problem.
But here's the problem with projects. Even cool ones usually just die on the vine. You make the poster, the teacher grades it, and it goes in the trash.
Or maybe on the fridge for a week if you're lucky.
Right.
Which brings us to phase 3, breaking down walls. This is principle 5, facilitate global communication.
Dissolving the 4 walls of the classroom.
Exactly. When the only person seeing your work is your teacher, the goal is to get a good grade. When the audience is real people, the goal becomes to make an impact.
The playbook mentions authentic audiences. Give me a concrete example.
Okay, they suggest using video conferencing or platforms like Discovery Education's Career Connect. So let's say a class is studying water quality. Instead of just writing a report, they actually video conference with a marine biologist or a local water sanitation expert. They interview them.
Or they publish their findings on a class blog that the whole community can read.
Right. And suddenly the stakes are real. Students just naturally polish their work more when they know other people are going to see it. It triggers that sense of social pride.
Now, speaking of social dynamics, we have to talk about principle 6, foster collaboration. I have to be honest, when I hear collaboration in school, I shudder. I have PTSD from group work.
You and every single person listening, it's a universal experience.
You know the drill. 4 kids at a table. 1 kid, usually me, does the whole project. 1 kid talks about video games. 1 kid stares at the wall.
And they all get an A.
Yes. It drove me crazy.
That is the flaw of analog group work.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to track who did what. But Principle 6 argues that technology solves that freeloader problem.
How are we putting surveillance on them?
In a way, yeah, through cloud-based tools and version history. Whether it's Google Docs, Slides, whatever, these tools track every single keystroke.
So the teacher can actually see that Timmy wrote 90% of the paper and Jimmy wrote the title.
Yes, but the playbook goes further than just policing. It suggests structuring the collaboration by assigning roles. You don't just say work together, you say person A is the researcher, you're finding the links. Person B is the designer, you lay out the slides. Person C is the fact checker.
So everyone has a lane to stay in.
And because it's synchronous, everyone is in the dock at the same time. It forces that negotiation. Hey, move that image here, or that source doesn't look right. It mirrors the modern workplace. Very few jobs are go sit in a corner alone anymore.
That's a great point. So we have the foundation, we're being creative, collaborating. But as a teacher, there's still a black box. I can see the final product, but I can't see what's going on in their heads.
This is phase 4, the process. And principle 7 is one of my favorites. Make thinking visible.
The playbook suggests screencasting for this. Isn't that just for making tutorials?
It can be, but here it's a diagnostic tool. Think about math. A student hands in a worksheet, 10 wrong answers. As a teacher, looking at that paper, do you know why they're wrong?
No, not at all. They just have the wrong number. You don't know if they didn't study or if they just made a typo.
Exactly. It could be a simple calculation error, or it could be a fundamental misunderstanding of the whole formula. You don't know. The strategy is have the student record their screen while they solve the problem, narrating their thought process. Okay, so now I'm moving X over here.
Why that is brilliant, because if they say, I'm dividing by 0, you can hear the misconception instantly.
Instantly. Tools like Canvas Studio or Google Vids make this easy. It shifts the assessment from the product, the answer, to the process, the thinking.
Speaking of processes, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Principle 8, scaffold with AI tools.
It wouldn't be a 2026 deep dive without mentioning AI.
Right. But the playbook is very specific. It doesn't say, let AI write your essay. It talks about scaffolding.
Exactly. This references a specific policy, but the application is what matters. The best practice is using tools like Gemini or Notebook LM to create leveled support.
Go back to that UDL concept. How does AI help the student who is reading 2 grade levels behind?
A teacher can take a complex article about, say, black holes. They can feed it into the AI and say, rewrite this at a 4th grade reading level, or generate a list of definitions for the vocabulary, or create sentence starters to help a student begin their response.
So the student is still doing the syncing. They are still learning about black holes.
Yes. The AI is acting as a personalized tutor that gets them ready for the lesson. It prevents that student from just checking out because the text is too hard. It's a real equity tool.
And once they're doing the work, they need to know if they're on the right track. Principle 9, implement real-time feedback loops.
The old model is, hand in your paper, wait 2 weeks, get it back with a grade.
And throw it in the trash. By the time you get the feedback, you've forgotten the assignment entirely.
Exactly. The learning moment is cold. The playbook emphasizes feedback during the learning process. And again, voice comes into play here.
The voice comment feature.
In platforms like Canvas, a teacher can leave a quick audio note instead of red ink. There's so much nuance in the human voice. Text feedback can often read as harsh. Audio feels like coaching. Hey, I see where you're going here, but have you thought about...
Faster for the teacher, too. Talking is definitely faster than typing.
Much faster. And for the whole class, they suggest digital exit tickets. Using a tool to ask 1 or 2 quick questions before the bell rings, the teacher gets an instant dashboard of data. They know before the kids even leave the room. Okay, half the class didn't get this. I need to reteach it tomorrow.
Instead of finding out 2 weeks later on the test.
Responsive teaching, that's the goal.
We're coming down the home stretch now. Phase 5 is about ownership. And this connects everything we've talked about. Principle 10, curate digital portfolios.
This really addresses the episodic nature of school. We tend to do Chapter 1, take the test, and then flush Chapter 1 out of our brains to make room for Chapter 2.
The cram and forget cycle.
Right. The digital portfolio on Google Sites or Canva forces the learning to be cumulative. But it's not just a digital filing cabinet. You don't just dump your files into a folder.
What makes it a real portfolio then?
The reflection. The playbook insists that at the end of a unit, the student has to record a video or write a reflection answering one specific question. How did my work improve from my first draft to this final version?
I love that. It forces them to actually look at their own trajectory.
It builds what we call a growth mindset. They can physically see, wow, look how bad my first attempt was, and look how much better this is now. It proves to them that effort leads to actual improvement.
So when we step back and look at all 10 of these principles, from being standards aligned all the way to digital portfolios, what's the big picture? Because to me, this doesn't feel like it's about gadgets. It feels bigger.
It's not about gadgets at all. If you take one thing away from this deep dive, it should be this. The playbook isn't about the technology. It's about agency.
Agency.
It's about moving from a model where the teacher pours knowledge into passive students to a model where students are active, creative, and visible in their own thinking. The technology is just the precision instrument that makes that whole shift possible.
It allows us to customize, to connect globally, to create in ways that, paper just can't.
Precisely. It turns the student from a passenger
Yeah.
into the driver of their own education.
It's exciting stuff. It genuinely makes me want to go back and redo my high school experience. I feel like I missed out on the green screen.
You could probably do a killer time travel interview now.
I think I'd make a fantastic Napoleon. I have the complex for it.
We will save that for the bonus episode.
Deal. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Educator's Playbook. We hope this gave you a new perspective on those glowing screens in the classroom.
And before you go, here's a thought to chew on. We talked a lot about redefinition, using these tools to do things that were previously impossible.
The time travel stuff, yeah.
Right. But ask yourself this. If we have the tools that allow for time travel, on global connection, on personalized AI tutors, why do so many classrooms still look and function exactly like they did 50 years ago? Rows of desks, facing the front, listening to one person talk.
That is the question, isn't it?
Technology is ready and waiting.
Yeah.
The real question is our mindset?
Something to think about. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Keep learning.